Today, we're thrilled to be sharing with you a conversation that we had with Eva Peringer, who's pivoted this summer to founding her own virtual theater and arts youth program. Her view of the pandemic focuses on gratitude and adjusting her perspective. It's a new and exciting view for us here on this podcast that we haven't really dove into yet, and we're really excited as we dig in deep to this episode. Eva took the opportunity to recognize her power and chose what she wanted to do with it during the COVID-19 pandemic. Eva also has a really unique way of acknowledging her privilege through all of this. So join us. We're really excited for today.
Before we get started with today's show, we have been talking a lot about how we are feeling and what we assume you may be going through. But we want to know what you are going through, how you are feeling, really feeling. You can send your thoughts to beyondcamp@gocamp.pro, and we will discuss it live on a new segment coming soon.
Welcome to Beyond Camp, where we explore the intersection of camp in our lives. For too long, camp professionals have referred to camp as being in a bubble, and we are here to burst that bubble. We know that camp intersects with every aspect of our lives, and we're excited to delve into those. We are your hosts, Rachel Kent. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Cassie Bloy. My pronouns are also she, her.
And we are here to go beyond camp with you. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and be sure to check out the show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Now, let's get started. Today, we're thrilled to be chatting with Eva Peringer, co-founder and director at Youth Theatre Online. Eva is a camp professional and arts educator based in Ontario. She's a rising young professional, and Eva has an impressive resume to go with that, including being the former director of youth and community programs at Ryerson University. She's actively involved in the Ontario Camps Association as a committee member for the annual conference. Eva's passionate about arts education and holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting. She's also one of my favorite storytellers. Eva, we're so excited to have you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Fabulous. Well, let's dive in and get started because there's so much to talk about today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your journey to running your own programming this summer?
Absolutely. So I entered the pandemic with holding my former position at Ryerson University. And my early experience with the pandemic was a different one than lots of camp professionals. Unlike many camp professionals, I knew definitely immediately that we wouldn't be running programming. I received that directive early on in March. And so I had the blessing, really, of not having to wonder and worry and stress. And that had a huge impact on me. I didn't have to hold hope as so many did. And if I were in a different position, I would have absolutely been holding hope as well. But I didn't have that luxury in a way. So I had the luxury of not having to think about it. And I knew we weren't doing programming. So I started the pandemic planning for virtual programming. That was our big goal, to do virtual programming. And then as plans continued to progress with the university, it was decided that at this time, the university would be putting on pause its youth and community programs. And I learned I wouldn't be having a job anymore. And I found myself realizing that what I was sad about, yes, I was sad I didn't have a job anymore, but what I was really sad about was that the community that I have poured my heart and soul into for the last number of years wouldn't receive the kind of support I knew I could provide it this summer. And then I had an idea of, I thought, oh, I can actually do this. I said it felt like I had a bedroom in my apartment full of like child-size face masks, which I couldn't use. They're not my size, but I was just deciding not to give them out to people. Or I could create my own programming and give out those face masks. So that was the beginning of the journey of Youth Theatre Online, and everything has just bloomed from there.
Yeah, that's really neat. How is it going this summer?
It's beautiful. I'm so grateful that I have something to do that I love and that challenges me and that I find really interesting. And managing a large camp, like which I was doing at Ryerson, is very different than creating a very small brand new business. So it's been really an exciting, interesting, challenging experience figuring out how to create a brand new business, what things matter, what things don't matter, how to create an audience, how to connect with the families, all of those things. And so it's been a big shift.
Yeah, I'm sure. It sounds massive, and like you really just dove into this brand new idea altogether. Can you tell us a little bit about about your company and about what you're trying to accomplish this summer? Because I know that you're more than just like babysitting kids online.
Absolutely. So a big part of our company is my co-founder and partner, Alyssa Potier. She and I have been working together from the beginning. We just, last week was our 10-week anniversary of starting our company. So it's a really big anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So we provide virtual custom musical theater and performing arts programming to kids online. So we pride ourselves on being accessible to families. We believe that every family should have access to high quality performing arts education, regardless of their financial situation. So when we're designing a new season or a new round of programming, we ask our families, we say, what kind of programming would you like? And then how much can you pay for it? And that's how much we charge. And if families come back to us and they say, actually, you know, things have panned out differently than we thought, we can't afford this, we say, great, no problem, have the programming. And they get to participate just like all the other kids, because with government support through CERB or myself having EI, we're very fortunate to be able to pay our rent despite or without considering the income we may receive from our families. So we are so blessed to be able to gift our programming and gift our time when the need strikes. So that's been really exciting.
Yeah, I love how mission oriented you are. I think that's incredible. And for our American listeners, EI is our unemployment insurance here in Canada, and CERB is the short form for some of the emergency relief that's come out during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well done. Good job.
It sounds amazing what you've done, but I assume that there might be a little bit of uncertainty in like starting your own business in the middle of a pandemic. How did you manage that uncertainty in deciding to start a business and the, implementation of it and going, is this even going to work?
Absolutely. I think that I had some great friends early on who I connected with when trying to figure out what I was going to do. And one of the great friends is Rachel, co-host of this podcast. And Rachel really helped me identify not what I lack, that sounds funny, but identify what kind of support I might need to get this off the ground. And one of those key pieces of support for me was a business partner, because I realized early on that if I didn't have anyone else to kind of light the fire under my butt, it wouldn't happen. And so that really helped. And as soon as I got my partner on board, we just ran from there. And I think the mission piece that was mentioned earlier is really key for me. Yeah. As soon as I realized I could do this, I kind of felt like I didn't have a choice. I thought, oh, I am capable of doing this. Because of the government support right now, I thought there's really never been a safer time to go out on a limb and start a brand new business. And so that really helped. I think it might have been like the perfect mixture of a whole bunch of different elements that led to this happening. And I don't think this would have happened another time. So it's a very COVID-centric experience.
That's incredible. I love hearing the positive stories that are coming out of COVID now as we progress. And I think it's just so good to hear the positive, because we are only hearing the not so positive stuff. But you mentioned it was kind of like a shift in your mindset as well. What was one of the biggest mental shifts you had to make to get to where you are this summer?
A huge one for me has been a change of expectation. When I was running our large programming, I would be looking at the registration milestones and I would go, okay, we're at 380 campers, 390 campers. I really want to get to 450 campers this summer or whatever. We were kind of like a big small camp. And so our goal this summer was to hit 400 or to have 400 campers with us at camp. And that's, I think, what would have happened this year. We were on track for that. And if those numbers were still my expectation, I would be miserable, because that's not at all the world we're living in right now. But I've experienced this real change in expectation. Now, when we have 10 kids enroll, we're like, oh my gosh, there are 10 kids enrolled. This is amazing. 10 kids. Wow. And I was looking earlier today, and 35 kids total have signed up for our programming. 35 kids. And last, like in my prior life as camp director at Ryerson, 35 kids would be like low enrollment for our first day of opening. And that would be kind of a worrisome number of, wow, only 35 kids registered on the day we opened. Oh no. But 35 kids is such an accomplishment. And so that change in expectation has been huge. And also external focus has transitioned to internal focus. My house has become the only place I am. Everything I interact with in my home is everything I interact with, period. And so, whereas my life, I think, used to be very kind of like a beautiful sprawling spider web across my city, whereas now it's in this nest of my house. And that has been a shift to get used to. And now I love it. I love everything being right here.
That's an amazing way to look at it and see how, how we've changed as individuals to focus on, more of the internal versus the external of ourselves as well. But I really like how you spoke about your shift in expectation. And it just, not only was it like the words you chose to use, but how you're saying it and the tone in your voice. And I think back to my days working in camp, and it was just like, those were the things I said. It's like, oh, that number is too low. We need more numbers. We need more numbers. But right now we need to be thinking more about experiences. Precisely. And any experience is a good experience right now.
Exactly. And those numbers are all human beings too. And so before, like, oh, we're only at 35 or whatever, those 35 kids are coming to camp. What a triumph that those 35 kids are coming to camp. And I think that sometimes that can get lost in big business camp. Sometimes is I like to think we always remember when we need to what we're actually doing. But I think this has been a real this smallering has been a real gift in a way, because it has allowed me anyways to really focus on what's important. And what's important is each camper and their experience and their families and their siblings, and how can we support the whole family. So that's been a real gift.
Yeah, and when you talk about those numbers, I mean, this is a business that you and your business partner have built yourself. You don't have other businesses. It's a pandemic, so you weren't bringing in consultants, and you didn't have other organizations that you were partnering with. So I think like that's incredible. And as a young camp professional, to go out on your own and start something is a remarkable thing. When Cassie and I were talking about our options earlier on in the season about what we had thought about doing, that didn't cross our plate as something to do. So
not
good
at
for
all.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think it's the shifting expectations again is just so incredible. And I know we've talked about like some of the positive things that came from all of this, but I love to dig into the tough stuff. So I'm curious as to what has caused you the most stress through all of this. And we'll start professionally, and then we'll dive into the personal afterwards.
Totally. I learned about myself. I think I already knew this to some degree, but what was really affirmed in this process was how much I associate my identity with my job. And which I guess is both, it crosses the intersection of professional and personal perfectly, because it is so one for me, I find. So it was a real tough thing when I realized that I didn't hold that title anymore, because that was a position that I have poured my life into for many years. I've supported that camp in immense growth in my time. And even before I was a director at that program, I was assistant director. And so I spent pretty much my entire adult professional life working with that program. So that was a huge shift that I found very challenging. But beyond that, what I really realized was how spoiled I was before with the companies that provided us with the things we need to do our business. So for instance, we were my old programming, we were a Camp Brain registration camp. And I'm often teased by what an advocate I am for Camp Brain, the registration software. I am a huge fan. And we couldn't afford their incredible services when we pivoted to start our own company. So we have a registration software. If they're listening, which they're not, they're fine. They're totally fine. They do the job. They keep everything in one place. And by comparison, it's like nothing. It's nothing compared to the registration software we were using before. And I learned how much I have taken for granted excellent customer service and fast turnaround times. And I guess that's what you pay for with a company like Camp Brain, is immediate, fast support to people who, you know, are needing it. And that's definitely been slower with our new registration software. And that's been a huge stress. Things that are outside of my control, I find to be the things that cause me the most stress, for sure, which is something I think I'm working on, letting go of things that are outside of my control.
That's fair. And we'll just say that was a great shout out to our Camp Owners podcast sponsor, Camp Brain. I appreciate that, Eva. I know you're a big fan.
I'm a huge fan. I love them so much. If anyone's thinking of shifting, just do it. It will make your life so much better. I'm blushing as I talk about them. That's how much I like them. They're amazing. They're
right.
a camp director's dream. That's all I'll say.
That's true. Yeah, it is funny, the things that you take for granted before, you know, whether it be your email platform or your registration software, or your website, the IT department, so that your advice to yourself doesn't have to be, have I restarted my computer? As mine often is.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi at the office, I've had to figure out and invest in better home Wi-Fi, which I'd never had to think about before, just so that I can run programming over Zoom, which is now literally my whole business.
Yeah, that's fair. What are some personal stresses for you that you faced?
I think it goes along with a blessing that I mentioned earlier of my whole world being my home now. My whole world is my home. So I teach programming in my bedroom. I've redesigned my bedroom so that I can teach programming in it successfully, so that I'm not monopolizing our whole apartment. But it has been a little bit challenging to find that to create boundaries when the place I sleep is my office, how I can support myself in resisting the temptation to send that email at 11 p.m. And one of the things that I find helpful in that is that that's not professional. So that helps me not do those things. But that's definitely a challenge I found. But I am so privileged with the support I have in my life. My partner, my friends, my community have all just supported me in so many different ways, energetically, and with the delivery of food and coffee or whatever as I'm figuring this all out.
Yeah, that's important. It's important to surround yourself with great people, and we're very lucky in the camp community, I think, more so than other places, to have incredible community around us. I love that you brought up the balance between like work and home life and drawing those boundaries, because I'm finding that working at home, that I'm like, oh, I could just log on for half an hour and send some emails. And then I'm like, are people expecting me to answer emails at 9 o'clock at night? No, they're not. The other day, my manager said to me, you know, Rachel, you're used to working at 10 p.m. because you're a camp director and you work in the summer. But you're not at camp right now, and you don't need to answer your emails at 10:30 at night. And I was like, all right.
Exactly. And I think that's another challenge I've had, is that in my body, summer hasn't come yet, because summer has always been defined by the thing that takes all my time and takes over my whole life, which is part of what I love about it. I love that about camp. And so in my body, it is firmly, like, I think we're probably in April now, which is good. I used to be in March, so that's good. Maybe I'm in May on some days. And so that's been a real challenge for me, is as summer milestones pass, just not, I believe that I believe that Canada Day, my birthday, I believe that these things have passed, but my body, I think my body, when it gets cold, will think, oh, it's an unseasonably cold spring, as it's October or whatever. So I'm working on shifting that internal clock to reflect what's actually happening this summer.
That's fair. I also feel that way sometimes. I'm curious, because we've touched on a lot here, but has there been an unexpected stress for you this summer?
That's a great question. I think the closest I would get to an unexpected stress is the things that I took for granted before, like customer support on our registration software was something I was completely not expecting, and then encountered and was kind of baffled that not all, customer support is excellent, that kind of thing. But beyond that, I think part of what makes me a strong camp director is that I'm really good at dealing with stuff as it comes. And I don't tend to not get too blown by big unexpected things that happen. So I think that's really helped me, and my resiliency also has helped me just kind of ride the wave of the summer.
And we love a good metaphor around here. Waves, roller
Yes.
coasters, that's what we're here for.
All of them, except for we don't really enjoy the roller coasters as much.
Yeah, no.
Personally. But we've touched a little bit on a few of the things you've kind of learned in this transition, but what have you learned about yourself through the course of the summer? Or / spring in your body?
Thank you. Wow, I feel so seen. I think that identity piece really was a new learning for me, that I associate myself completely or so much with my professional role. And that was unexpected for sure, and a huge self-learning, because I think in some ways that's great and helpful. Yeah. And in some ways I think it's really not also. And I think this has been a really helpful re-examination of who I actually am beyond the signature in my email. Yeah.
So who is that person then?
It's a great question. It's a great question. Well, and I think an interesting thing is that that's been an important kind of self-learning as well. I think that the camping industry, as incredible as it is, and it's also hard. And sometimes it can be kind of relentless. And sometimes we don't really get a break to re-examine, is this what I want to do? Is this really what I want to be doing? And that's been a learning as well, that this is what I want to do. I had an opportunity recently to pursue a job working as an administrator for a university, nothing to do with people or anything. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, I think if I lived that life, with all the respect to people who are university administrators exclusively, that's great. I think to me, it would feel like I was living my life in black and white. I think for me, what gives color to my life, what infuses my life with just the beautiful feelings and the smells and everything that feels good, is working with people, working with kids, supporting kids in discovering who they really are, supporting kids in being their best self. And I happen to do that through the arts. So many do that through many different amazing avenues. So in some ways I've learned that in many ways, what my email signature is who I am. And it's what I want to continue doing. And who knows in what form that will take as we look back on the summer. Maybe this will be the pivotal moment that will lead me to who knows or what. But it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, you never know when those pivotal moments are going to come, that's for sure. If there's one thing that I've learned, I mean, Cassie and I ended up with this podcast after logging onto a Camp Mavericks call, and I think both being kind of sad about the state of our lives. And Travis was like, I have an idea. So sometimes you just need to log on to a group call and look kind of sad, and somebody will hand you something, is what we learned from this.
Yeah, the moment it occurred to me that I could start my own business, I was standing on a step stool in my kitchen, rearranging my canned goods, watching a video of someone performing a song. And it just occurred to me out of nowhere. I was like, oh, actually I could do this. And I wasn't even thinking about it. I was watching like a Billie Eilish song or something. Like it was just like a random moment. But that's the moment I know I was adjusting the beans, and now we're here.
Fantastic. Well, I hope that your pantry is nice and organized as well.
It was at that point, and then I started my own business. Now, who knows?
Fair enough. Wow, this conversation has been phenomenal so far, and I'm so excited to continue. We're just going to take a quick pause here.
Hi, I'm Eva. I'm a guest on this podcast, and I'm really excited to read the ad read because it's for ACA Illinois. ACA Illinois takes the time to keep a pulse on what's actually happening within the camp community. This is evident in so many ways, one of which is their supporter programs like this. They help camp pros stay connected through podcasts throughout the year. ACA Illinois values the importance of staying in touch and elevating voices within the camp community. This is so important. Staying connected and in touch in this field helps drive our creativity and work when it comes to designing professional development programs. Bookmark the acail.org/calendar and stay in touch and in the loop for all of our great events. Thank you so much for ACA Illinois for sponsoring this podcast.
So we're going to jump back into this and kind of pivot a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned in your connections with your community and your families and your campers?
Absolutely. That has been such a powerful element of this whole experience. I had the great privilege of telling our camp families at Ryerson before I left that I was leaving and that I would be doing this new adventure. And I know that's a privilege so many don't have. And I'm so grateful for it. The outpouring of support that we received from our families really was breathtaking. Families that I haven't talked to in years, writing me, telling me about the impact I had on their kids years ago, and others who hadn't even come to camp yet, but were so touched by what I had said in a phone call months ago that they wanted to follow me over to this new adventure. And that really I found quite powerful and not surprising, but it definitely was unexpected. I think sometimes when working for a large organization, the name of which is so significant, such as Ryerson, very often the reason people choose camp is because it's Ryerson, which I totally get. That makes sense to me. And what I've learned is that the reason people stay often is the leadership at camp and the environment that's created by the leadership. And the whole point, if I'm doing my job really well, I am not the center of attention at camp. And so it was quite powerful to hear the stories of the impact and learn about the impact that I've had on the lives of families and their kids, and how parents have changed how they're raising their kids because of me or because of my programming. And that just I found so impactful and really, really touching. And it's been really neat also working with brand new families. Some campers who have come to our programming this summer are campers who had never even heard of my Ryerson programming, but had heard through a friend of a friend of a friend that I was doing this programming. And it's been really neat to develop brand new connections with brand new families as an independent company, as a small, tiny company that's just my business partner and I. We're not representing a huge university, a huge brand. And the freedom in that is huge also. My partner and I can say, what kind of stories do we feel comfortable telling? What kind of stories do we think is important? Do we think are important? And that's been really neat. It feels more intimate, I think, than before, because it's just us. At the end of the day, it's just us. It's not this huge brand with a legal department and marketing and advertising and all that. It's just us. So it's allowed us to be really ourselves, I think, with our families, and really transparent and upfront. And that's been a big gift for sure.
You mentioned the new families, and this is something I was always curious about through the pandemic and all the virtual programs, and new families who don't know camp or have never done camp, and their first touch of camp is virtual. How do you think that will change their thoughts around the concept of in-person camp in the future?
I think that's a great question. And it's amazing to watch. I'm working with 2 4-year-olds right now who have never been to camp because they're not allowed to come to camp before age 4. And they both just turned 4 as well. So this is their first summer. And they're amazing to work with, because sometimes, like on the first day, one of them was so internally focused that they could barely say their own name. And I knew their name, and I could see their name on their Zoom calls. So I would say, oh, would you get, like, I said their name. Could you say your name? Introduce yourself. And they kind of like mumbled it into their shoulder, kind of. And yet that same kid, 10 minutes later, after we had finished our physical warm-up, sat down and then adjusted their screen so that they were in frame. And I thought, wow, this is a 4-year-old who can barely say their own name and yet knows about correct framing on a Zoom call. That's astounding. These are kids that are experiencing something we have never experienced. Yeah. These are kids who are more tech savvy in their brains, deep down in their bones, more tech savvy than maybe we will ever be. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see next year or 2 years from now, or whenever it is that we can all be in person again. I think these kids will have a fundamentally different understanding of what camp is. And I think it might be a really magical experience when they walk into the building and see the whole world and see the magic all around them, not contained in a little screen. I think it may be overwhelming, especially for kids who thought that they knew what camp was. Also, yeah, we also don't call ourselves camp, but I think that it's all the same. Yeah.
Earlier, I made a comment and I said, you're not just babysitting kids on Zoom. You're really mission oriented. And I think that that's true of all camps that are doing online programming, is that they're really mission oriented and intentional. And I think it's really incredible that parents and guardians, caregivers are going to get to see this because they're often in the room with their kids during it. And so we talk about like the intentionality behind camp and how important it is. Like your kid comes out of their shell, but parents, guardians, they don't always get to see that because they're away at camp all day. And so I think it's phenomenal that they get to experience it alongside their kids almost.
Absolutely. And in some cases, literally alongside. With those 4-year-olds I mentioned, I never see the parents, but I can hear that they're right behind the laptop. And it's kind of amazing. They're there sometimes to prompt a camper if they've gotten distracted with something that I can't see, or also they're there to provide a hug if the camper needs a hug. And I think that allows the campers to come out of their shell more quickly in some cases because they know they can step away. And also, we have been very clear with our parents that we are not childcare. Our Zoom presence is not a replacement for childcare. And so that's also a neat kind of thing that we remove that part of our responsibility. And at the beginning of our programming, it definitely was a pressure I wasn't used to, having the parents and the family and whoever was in the room being able to hear every word I say. But I also think there's a real pro to that as well, of parents having an idea of what's actually happening. And also, I think there's kind of an accountability for the kid as well, that if parents have heard the whole lesson, the parents are as aware as the kid of what exactly has happened that day. So I like everybody being in the know.
It's amazing. It's just the concept of thinking into the future and how this is all going to pull together as well. But if we look, say, maybe 10 years in the future, back on to summer 2020, what do you hope you'll remember?
That's a great question. I have a tendency of looking back at everything as if it was the most special thing. I've just learned this about myself. A number of years ago, I broke my arms. And I look back at those days when I was in the hospital with such tender fondness, even though those days, I mean, I was in a lot of pain. I was in a hospital room. Like, it wasn't great, but I look back and I drive by the hospital and say, oh my gosh, I was there. That was so beautiful. So this is a thing about myself. So I have no doubt that 10 years from now, looking back, I will think this is the most magical summer. But I also think that reading is true. This has been really special. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I wouldn't have wished this on myself. And I'm really grateful for it. I think it is a whole realm of experiences I never would have had. And I've grown as a human, as a camp professional, as a teacher. I'm now teaching actively again, which I haven't done in years because I'm now doing it all. And I think it will be pivotal looking back on it. And what direction, I'm not sure, but I think it will be pivotal. And I think it'll be something that I'll be really, really grateful for.
That's amazing. Wow, you've shared so many amazing things with us so far. And you said something earlier that's just been sort of percolating in my mind. You said the camp industry is relentless sometimes, especially in
Yeah.
the summer. I'm curious, like, you've identified that, which is always sort of like the first step. And it's not necessarily a problem, but it certainly can bring with it some tougher things and can
Yeah.
make staying in the camping industry a challenge because
Mhm.
it doesn't allow the rest of our lives to intersect with our camp life when camp
Mhm.
is just such a like unrelenting force.
Mhm.
Um, how do you think in the future you would learn from this, and how would you ease up on some of that relentlessness
That's
of
a
the
great
camp industry?
question. That's a great question. And it's tricky because, and this is perhaps part of the problem, but in some ways, I think that relentlessness is part of the magic of it and
Hmm.
part of what I love about it for sure. Um, but I think there are different things. Having connections in the camp community is so valuable. There are a whole bunch of people I'm connected to now through working with the Ontario Camps Association as we all, as a camping industry, tried to figure out what we were doing. There are people that prior to this summer I wasn't connected with who run very similar programming to the program that I was previously running at other major educational institutions within Toronto. And I didn't know their names, I let alone being friends with them prior to this. Whereas now they're my friends. And I think that a big part of what can happen in the camp community when you're in that relentless pressure of being in the summer is that it can feel like it's just happening in your tiny little world, which feels so significant. It's your whole world. And I think what's really key is making those connections, going out of your way to, look up equivalent positions at other organizations or at similar camps in your area or whatever. In the camping industry, we are so fortunate to have such a non-competitive thing going on, which I think is rare within a lot of industries. And so I think that in the future, part of what will help us understand that there is more world beyond our bubble of our camp is connecting, actively reaching out to other camps and staying actively connected. Maybe it's like a Thursday afternoon, everyone leaves their camp and goes for ice cream. How wild of an idea is that? Or whatever. That kind of thing I think is so helpful. Also, getting good support around you is so key. When my first summer as director at the camp, my previous camp, I I was a day camp and I was on site most days until 11 p.m. and then on site every morning at 8 a.m. at the latest. And I rarely took lunch breaks and I was there all the time, and that was my whole life. And then as I became more confident in my role and I hired incredible people around me, last summer we had a whiteboard in the office, and we were trying to see how long of a streak we could get going where everyone who worked in the office had a lunch break every day. And that kind of thing can be really hard to manufacture at camp, but if you can, it really helps. Kind of your what can be like a solid world becomes like a world you can see through to other worlds and other things happening, and you can help have that little bit of a life.
I love it. I think that's going to be really important for us to remember, because especially as we leave this summer with the like collective trauma that we've all
Mm-hmm.
or have experienced and in many ways are still experiencing, because we know that this isn't ending when the summer ends.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you feel we can be intentional of how we role model ourselves during this time, whether it be to our staff or to our campers. Um, what are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that?
I think gratitude is so huge. I think that that if that is if that's kind of a guiding lens through which you see everything, life just gets a lot better. Even at the beginning, when I lost my job, for instance, I was sad and sad for the families we wouldn't be able to support. But what I felt mostly was grateful. I felt so grateful that I had a home that's safe to live in, and a partner who is safe and who I love, and friends. And I think that as a guiding principle in life is so helpful. And I think gratitude versus fear is, I'm not quite sure if those are quite the other ends of each other, but I think there's something there. I think that if we live our life fueled by fear, which sometimes happens, scary things happen, but if we live our life fueled by fear, I think we are way more likely to make not quite the right choice. Maybe the choice we make is in the ballpark of the right choice, but it's not quite there. And I think that as a camping industry, we had to make hard choices this summer about, if I don't run programming, I will lose my camp, or I will lose our location, or whatever it is. And I think that often, or in many cases, I saw camps choosing to focus on what they did have, the gratitude of the community, the strength in their community, versus the fear of loss, the fear of all these things. I think that's key, and something that I think we can really model, and we do model as an industry, I think.
I think so. I think that's really important, because for so many of us, we're living with incredible fear and uncertainty right now in every aspect of our lives. And figuring out how we acknowledge that fear while also moving forward is really important. And I love that you stressed, we might not make the right choice, but it's going to be in the ballpark of the right choice. And
exactly.
I think if anything, the pandemic has taught us that there's choices out there we didn't even realize were possible.
Exactly.
Your business, this podcast, so many things that just came out of it, and we went for it in our hearts. We tried to set some of that fear aside, and I think that has been really helpful for a lot of us. So thank you for raising that. I think that's fantastic.
Think also, it's recognizing the power you do have. We were all placed in positions we didn't expect ourselves to be in this year. But I think when people recognize the power, what is actually in their control, that's when really interesting things happen. And like, for instance, there were people who suggested that I take a break this summer because I didn't have to go to work. I could continue getting government support, and that would be great. And no judgment to people who may be doing that, and I'm excited for them. But I realized, wait a minute, I have power to actually do something. I have the privilege of a safety net, both personally, but also with the government support. I have a safety net right now, and I have the power to try something, or a power to start a podcast, or whatever it is. Recognizing your power is such a helpful thing. And then realizing, and I think it's also cautionary sometimes, realizing the power you do have and choosing not to do things is just as important as realizing the power you do have and choosing what to do with that power.
I love that. Everything you said, I know I've said I love that a lot. I think it's great, and you bring such a different perspective than Cassie and I have had, and that other people we've had on the show have had. And that's what's so fantastic about this, is that the way that our lives intersect with the camp is different because of the different circumstances that we're in. So that's incredible. Really quickly, because we've touched on this before, but if you were to transport yourself back to March, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
You'll be fine. I mean, knock on wood, we think we'll be fine. But I think that in March, I had this feeling of like, okay, I've done 2 days at home now. Wow, 2 days. And I knew exactly what I did on each of those days, and like how I set up my life. And now, like, I remember there was a time when I was still counting the days we had been in quarantine. And it's all, we adapt, we figure it out. And I think I wasn't feeling, I think I wasn't feeling particularly stressed at the beginning of, oh my gosh, how could I ever do this? But I think there would have been a reassurance in, right, I think I'm going to be fine, and I actually am going to be fine. Like this, I think also there was a fear at the beginning of like, do we have to go, like, is this the time when we flee the city and go like hunker down somewhere? Or like, is this the time when we buy all the toilet paper or whatever? And like, no, actually, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's all gonna be relaxed.
There will be enough toilet paper for everybody.
Exactly. Not to undermine the really challenging experiences people have. I have had a very privileged experience of the pandemic, partly due to the circumstances in my life, also partly because of how I have chosen to interact with it. But I do want to recognize that I'm very privileged to live in a place where I have adequate government support that can cover my rent. But it can cover my rent. That's huge, immense privilege.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate that.
totally. Yeah.
So as we start to wrap up here, I'm going to give you a little bit of freedom here, but what is your biggest takeaway about living through a pandemic, whether that's personal, professional, some other part of your identity that you haven't touched on yet?
Great question. I think finding ways to make sure you stay connected with people. I think it is so, like, before in life, for people who worked outside of their home, there were a million connections that would happen every day. You know, your neighbor as you walk away from your house, the bus driver, the person who works at the coffee shop that you're buying coffee from, the people you're in an elevator with, the list goes on and on, colleagues you check in with. And now I can live my whole life without seeing anybody. I can have my groceries delivered and I will not see anybody. And I think I think it's important to develop routines that force you to connect with other people. Some of my fondest memories of the pandemic were times when I had weekly chats, weekly Zoom calls with pals of mine. And it was every Tuesday or whatever. We knew what we were doing that evening is after dinner checking in and then just talking for hours. Or my family at one point in the pandemic developed a weekly trivia Zoom call. And I don't care about trivia, but what was really important was seeing them every week. Mm-hmm. And so I think that would be the biggest advice I would have for anyone living through a pandemic right now, everybody, or for the future, is just find routines that force you to connect with people. And what's great about that is if you're having a really bad day, sometimes you don't realize you're actually grumpy until you log on to that Zoom call. And it can be hard sometimes because now many of us live our whole lives on Zoom and we can want to just unplug, and I get it and support that. But also, as a people, we are best when we are part of community, I think. And so finding ways to keep that community and develop community is so key. So key.
Amazing. It sounds like you're speaking a little bit more passionately about that. Would you say that's part of your silver lining of the past?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many people who I now consider my friends who I wasn't friends with at the beginning of the pandemic. Subcommittees that popped up within the Ontario Camps Association to react to various things. Now those people are actually my friends because we were all going through this unpredicted time together. And so there's already kind of a layer of vulnerability that places on all of us, rather than, before it would be rare to enter a boardroom and say, how's it going at your house this week? Or how's your family? Like, that's a line that normally isn't crossed within the professional world. But if we're in each other's living rooms, that kind of barrier is taken down. And I felt and experienced within myself and with others that I've connected with, that people are just a little bit closer to a place where they can really share what's actually happening. And that's been huge. I have so many friends that I didn't have before, and I feel so grateful to have those people in my life.
Wonderful. What a great spot to end at, with a little bit of gratitude today. It's something that we feel is very important as well, but it also kind of leads us into our recharge station a bit. Our recharge station is talking about self-care, and we believe that that is critical to personal wellness in both the good times and the difficult times. It's also something we as camp professionals really struggle with. We want to know how people charge their batteries and what makes them feel inspired. Rachel, what do you have for us today?
I don't know that this helps me feel inspired, but it helps charge my batteries pretty literally, I would say. And that's my new sleep schedule I've adopted. I joined Ruby Compton's Sleep Challenge on the COVID-19 Slack channel. And I am trying to get between 7 and 8 hours of sleep a night. And it's a delight. It's, I can't recommend enough. Set a schedule. You're not always going to stick to it 100%, but it's been a big game changer for my mental health.
Wow. Was it really hard to do at first?
It's still very hard to do, but yes, it has been a great start.
Wow, good for you.
It's a great challenge. I participated during round 1 as well. It's great, but it's hard to hold yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm really impressed.
Eva, do you have a piece of self-care that you like to use to keep you going?
Totally. I think especially as we are in our homes all the time, finding little gems of special things within our homes that feel special. And by nature that changes. Maybe it's having a bath, or maybe it's waking up a little bit early and taking time before your Zoom calls to sit on your balcony or by a window with a cup of tea. And my recent one of those little special things has been I started watching TV in bed. I have been a firm no TV in the bedroom kind of person, and then I was gifted a tiny projector for my birthday by my partner. And this morning I was having breakfast and I thought, oh my gosh, I have 20 minutes. I'm gonna sit in my bed and eat my breakfast and watch a little bit of a YouTube video. And I can just choose to do this with my time. I'm not commuting anywhere. I can really carve out this time. And it felt so special and so like, what an exciting start to my day. And rather than just watching a YouTube video on my phone or something, it felt so juicy. So my recommendation is to find juicy little treats for yourself.
I love it. I also am really interested in this very tiny projector.
Oh, it's amazing. We can talk after. It's amazing.
Excellent. And mine for everyone this week is to drink water. I have noticed that my water bottle this week has stayed full all week, not because I'm refilling it, but because I'm not drinking it. So make sure you get your water like every great camp professional always recommends.
That's a great one.
So we want to thank you for joining us beyond camp. We hope that you were able to connect and reflect with us as we journey beyond the property lines and bring camp with us. As we wrap up, we want you to be able to reach out and connect with us. You can reach myself, Cassie, at cassie.bloy@stephanericard.ca. Eva, how can our guests get in touch with you?
Your guests can get in touch with me by emailing youththeateronline@gmail.com, yes, or sending me an email at eva@peringer.ca, peringer.ca.
Fabulous. And our listeners are always welcome to send me an email at kentar@girlguides.ca.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. To all of our listeners, please be sure to check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. We want to give a great big thank you to Eva for sharing her experiences through the pandemic with us today and all of her awesomeness, to the team at Go Camp Pro for holding space for these conversations, to ACA Illinois for their sponsorship and support of this idea, to Matt, our producer, for just continuing to make us sound great every week. And to you, our listeners, thank you for listening. You allow us to keep this conversation happening. Beyond Camp is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Go well and safely, friends. We'll see you next week.